Francis Ngannou's future is in doubt. With UFC no longer in the picture, who knows where he could end up next? Things are certainly starting to get interesting for the heavyweight champ. He's officially out of the UFC. Yep, you heard that right. Dana White himself confirmed it at the press conference announcing Jon Jones' first fight in over a year against Cyril Gane at UFC 285.
Yes, he did. Junior Dos Santos, 7-0 for Cyril Gane. Wow.
It turns out that Ngannou was offered an insanely lucrative deal that could have made him the highest paid fighter in UFC history, but apparently he believes he can make even more money by fighting lesser opponents outside of the company. So the UFC decided to let him off the hook and release him from his contract, giving up their right to match any offers he gets in the future, including the highly anticipated fight against Jon Jones. This is a huge loss for the UFC, as Ngannou was not only one of the top heavyweights in the world, but he was also ranked 6th in the UFC men's pound-for-pound rankings.
Any big shots?
Elbow attacks. Oh, none of eyes have been hurt. Jumping switching.
So it'll be interesting to see what Ngannou ends up doing now. And who knows, maybe we'll even get to see him back in the UFC one day. But looking back at it, this departure is definitely going to sting the UFC for a lot of reasons. He was one of their greatest heavyweights ever.
Undisputed UFC heavyweight champion of the world, Francis.
While it's never easy to see one of the top fighters in the world leaving, Ngannou had his reasons, and he shared them on Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour show. Apparently, it wasn't about money, it was about freedom. Ngannou said that during contract negotiations, he asked the UFC to provide health insurance for all its fighters and to allow athletes to have their own sponsorship deals. Unfortunately, those requests were rejected.
As an independent contractor, you don't really have a say in that contract. You don't even have a right. So I can't do that.
And this prompted Ngannou to make the difficult decision of leaving. He wanted to preserve his freedom, as he put it. He didn't want to give all the power away. UFC President Dana White suggested that Ngannou left because of a desire to fight lesser opponents. However, Ngannou has rejected this idea, instead suggesting that he could switch to boxing.
Even than we hoped. Better. Wow. Sensational. A minute 10 into round number 11.
Who would know it would go like this?
With Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua being his ideal opponents. All in all, it's sad to see Francis Ngannou leave the UFC. He was an incredible heavyweight champion who won 12 out of 14 fights during his time with the promotion.
Phone to try to get a matchup with Ngannou. Down goes the Reem. Francis Ngannou has arrived.
Leaving a lasting legacy along the way. But it's safe to say that if there was one man that didn't handle all of this well, it was Dana White. His comments on Ngannou's exit left a bad taste in a lot of UFC legends' mouths. Even Daniel Cormier criticized White. Whenever one of the big-name fighters decides to go against UFC President Dana White, he likes to spin a narrative about how they're no longer as motivated or competitive. He did it with GSP and Eddie Alvarez, Gilbert Melendez, and now Francis Ngannou. According to White, Ngannou's refusal to sign a new contract is due to him wanting to fight lesser opponents and make more money. But even two-division champ Daniel Cormier, considered by many to be a company man, isn't buying this idea that Ngannou was scared of Jon Jones. While discussing Jones's upcoming shot at the heavyweight title, Cormier said, "Isn't it ironic that now he's in this situation? My advice to you, Jon, is to get thick skin because people will be unrelenting. Right now, because Francis left, it's almost like Francis avoided Jones. That's not true. Francis would have fought him on any day of the week. Cormier was the last guy I expected to defend Francis in this situation, but it goes to show just how respected the heavyweight is in the industry. But it's not just Daniel Cormier. Other fighters also said White's allegations were a bit too much. Matt Brown suggested that White was lying. Francis Ngannou is the kind of guy who ain't scared of nobody, yet somehow UFC President Dana White felt it necessary to imply that he was in some way afraid of taking risks. With wins over over 3 out of 5 top heavyweights already under his belt, it seems a bit rich to suggest that he'd be looking to avoid the tougher competition. But according to UFC fighter Matt Brown, White was likely just speaking to the lowest common denominator and trying to appeal to casual fans who would buy into anything he said. It might work with some people, but Brown doesn't think anyone could reasonably buy into it when it comes to Ngannou. In fact, he believes the reigning heavyweight champion's departure from the UFC is one of the biggest losses the promotion has ever had to suffer, and for good reason. Not only does Ngannou have the title, but he's still in his prime, meaning he has plenty of time to make an even bigger impact wherever his career takes him next. Bottom line, don't believe everything you hear. Ngannou is a force to be reckoned with, and we can't wait to see what lies ahead for the champ. While Ngannou has received a lot of support from fellow fighters, he definitely hasn't made Jon Jones and his team happy. Jones' advisor called out Ngannou. If there's one man that isn't pleased, it's Jon Jones' advisor, Richard Schaefer. He had some thoughts on Francis Ngannou's recent decision to part ways with UFC, and let me tell you, he wasn't too pleased about it. Schaefer believes that Ngannou made a mistake by not re-signing with the UFC. He said that while he's a fan of Ngannou's and wishes him all the best, he didn't understand why Ngannou would be looking to move away from MMA when he hadn't transcended the UFC yet. Schaefer was also firmly against any potential boxing matches between Ngannou and other professional boxers, pointing out that it wouldn't be a fair fight. He noted that an MMA athlete would have no chance to win in a boxing ring, while a boxer competing under MMA rules would struggle to come out on top in an octagon. Schaefer seemed to be trying to save fans the disappointment of seeing a one-sided fight, noting that there's no point in paying for a match when you already know who will win. And honestly, I can't disagree with that. But even though the fight against Jones is off the table, there are even more options for Ngannou in the boxing ring. He could even take on Tyson Fury.
Everything tonight. Very simple. Joyce might be next for Tyson Fury. But must be so much respect in there. There are boos around the stadium, but I really cannot understand that.
That's right, Tyson Fury is ready to take on Francis Ngannou in what could be one of the biggest fights of this generation. The former UFC heavyweight champion has officially become a free agent and is looking for his next fight. While Fury still proposes a mixed rule set that can give Ngannou some advantages, the undefeated heavyweight champion is confident that his boxing pedigree will be too much for Ngannou to handle. Fury has stated numerous times in the past that he'd be interested in clashing with Ngannou and that the fight didn't have to be a straight-up boxing match. With a perfect 33-0-1 record as the reigning WBC and ring heavyweight champion, Fury would undoubtedly be a massive favorite in a boxing match against Ngannou. Although Ngannou has been dreaming about crossing over to boxing for most of his life, he still has no amateur or professional experience whatsoever in it. That said, just days after becoming an unrestricted free agent, Ngannou named Fury or Anthony Joshua as ideal opponents. It remains to be seen how quickly the matchup could come together, however, because Fury is already in deep negotiations for a champion versus champion matchup against WBA, IBF, WBO, and IBO heavyweight king Alexander Usyk.
Still gallant and still brave. He's really closing this gap with real, minimum effort.
Do you think Fury and Ngannou could fight? Let us know in the comments below. See you in the next one.